So there may be an issue facing those of us who are moving from Switch 1 to Switch 2. I don't think I've seen anyone else talk about. Maybe it's not really a problem. It's like there's something I've overlooked, which is why no one's talking about it. Or maybe it's just not occurred to anybody. So I watch quite a lot of other YouTube channels like Spawnwave, RGT85, Nintendo Life, Good Vibe Gaming, Player Essence, Dr. 81, Blunty and others who have mentioned lots of other issues that the Switch 2's facing, especially such as game key cards, VR support being cut from TVs, game share problems and other issues. Things like as well, someone mentioned, well, it's a bit confusing where you've got game share and also the virtual card sharing service, which I can't remember what that's called. Should have researched it. But someone's saying that when they shared a game with someone, that they then lost access to their save file or cloud save files or something went wrong. But this issue is specifically about the internal storage and having enough space even for all your Switch 1 data. Now, the issue of the storage being fairly small at 256 gigabytes has obviously come up. But then when it comes to that, there's a lot of people who are thinking, well, first-party games, you could probably fit quite a lot on because they're not that big. But then third-party games, some of them are quite huge. So, for example, Mario Kart World is 23.4 gigabytes. Donkey Kong Bonanza is supposed to be 10 gigabytes. Third-party games, apart from Cyberpunk, I think, pretty much all on the game key cards. So whether you get a game key card or download it digitally, it's obviously going to be in your internal storage or MicroSD card. Now, Cyberpunk comes in at 56.8 gigabytes and fitting on a 64 gigabyte card. Street Fighter is 48.8 gigabytes. And Split Fiction, as far as I know, is the largest game size so far at 73 gigabytes, which obviously wouldn't even fit on the game, full cartridge. But they're going with a download code, so you've not even got the benefits, which some people argue one way or the other about game key cards. The fact that you can sell them or lend them out afterwards. Whereas with a code, you can't, but obviously it's tied to your account. So if you lost your Switch or anything, then you'd still have access to that. So 256 gigabytes internal storage. Now, don't know how much the operating system would take up, but you won't get full 256 gigabytes to use as storage. One, because of obviously the operating system, and two, because of the way that they market the amount of gigs you get on storage. You actually get less because of something to do with binary and other things, which I won't go into. Anyway, so this isn't specifically about whether 256 is that much for internal storage. It's more the fact that, if you're taking that as you're buying a Switch 2 from scratch, first-party games, the irony is you get first-party games on the cartridge, then you're not taking up internal storage anyway. So if you're buying first-party games on cart, then you're not taking that up, so it's not an issue. The problem will come when you've got only the options for third-party games of digital key cards or the digital download, where you've got no choice but for it to be taking up your internal storage or your SD cards. So the Switch 1 has 32 gigs of storage, and this is my Switch. I have a 512 gigabyte SD card. Now, as today, when I checked, I have 12.4 gigs free on the internal storage. So that means about 13 gigs has been used, because about 6 to 7 gigs is reserved for the operating system, from what I could find. The 512 gigabyte SD card is actually about 470 gigabytes of storage. Now I've used 325 gigabytes of that. And so 325 gigs plus the 13 gigs that I've taken up on my internal storage means I have 338 gigabytes on my Switch taken up with game data, game saves, files, etc. There is videos and pictures as well from that, from the game capture and recording feature. So 338 gigabytes of data that I have just for my Switch 1 is obviously not going to fit on 256 gigabytes of internal storage. That's 82 gigabytes left over, which isn't going to fit. Now here's a issue as well that doesn't help, and that is Nintendo themselves have said you can use the older SD cards, so the ones that will be in your existing Switch, in the Switch 2, but they're only going to work for media. So just the, pictures and videos that you've recorded, I guess. I mean, I don't know what else you can stick on there because you can't put on custom songs or music and things like that. Anyway, so it seems as if you can't even stick your old SD card into the Switch 2 and then have that reading games from there. So let's say you just had your SD card for your Switch 1 games, and then you kept your Switch 2 in internal storage for Switch 2 games. As far as I can see, you're not able to do that. So as it is, I've only seen 256 gigs and 500 gigabytes MicroSD Express cards for sale. And that's not just the ones branded for Nintendo Switch 2 from there's like Samsung and SanDisk. The 500 gig one I've seen coming in at around £96. But even looking on Amazon, I mean, maybe in some niche places you can get more, but I've not seen anything bigger than 500 gigs. It is the Switch 2, as with the Switch 1, able to take microSD cards up to 2 terabytes. But obviously they don't exist yet, and they're going to be expensive even if they were. Probably, I don't know, as much as the Switch 2, I'd could guess. So I've only got a 512 gig SD card, as I said. If you're someone that's already got a terabyte or a 2 terabyte card, then the problem is going to be even bigger for you, because at best you're going to get on the Switch 2 at the moment no more than around 700 gigs of storage available if you had the 500 gig SD Express card with your 256 internal storage. That's taking into account the operating system and the fact that 500 gigs is going to actually be less available space than that, about 470. So if you've already got, a large amount of games and data on your Switch 1, most of that's not going to be coming across to Switch 2 for the time being. Now, when you can transfer data from Switch 1 to Switch 2, apparently there's 2 different ways. At the moment, I don't know if I think you can do it now, but I've not looked into it because I don't need to do this option. But you can upload all your data onto Nintendo's cloud. And then if, for example, you're wanting to trade in your Switch 1, so you don't lose everything, you basically back it up there and then can trade in your Switch 1, sell it to someone else, etc. And then when the Switch 2 comes out, you can then download your data from that cloud and put it onto your Switch 2. Now, how much of that is going to get actually uploaded to the cloud? Because of things like actual game data and stuff, from what I'm aware, they won't actually back that up. Anything you've downloaded from Nintendo's eShop will just be obviously granted to you, and so therefore when you get the Switch 2, you download your actual data and save files and things like that, and then you then go into each individual, well, I gather you'd have to, but maybe there's an easier way, download each of those games again from the eShop. The other option of transferring, which is going to be available when the Switch 2 launches, is that you can directly transfer it from your Switch 1 to your Switch 2, as far as I'm aware, via Wi-Fi. So therefore, you'd have the 2 devices set up next to each other and then transfer it across. Now again, in that instance, when I've done that with my phones before, you have the option to select what you want to transfer. And if there are large files and things that you can think, well, I won't do that because it'll take too long, and then I'll just re-download in my own time from App Store. And likewise, if you've got stuff on your SD card, you'd normally would decide to not transfer that, and then you just remove the SD card and stick it in your new phone. If you've got an SD card slot, which some even expensive phones nowadays I don't think do. Anyways, so when you get to the point of transferring the data across, apparently I've also heard that the cloud save option, where you upload all your data to the cloud, is going to be there for maybe just a year, and then it will be deleted. So again, I'm not sure how much of that data would actually go across in terms of what the file size. Let's say you've got a 1 terabyte card in your Switch 1. It's probably not going to be all that, because a lot of that's going to be taken up with game data. And so, maybe it'd be only like 10% of that maybe would actually be going there. So downloading that will be easy and quick when you get a Switch 2. But then after that, you're going to have to go through, say, the eShop and pick and choose what you're going to want to sort of download again, because you're not going to have room to fit it all on, basically. Now, let's say even if you didn't have that much, like a terabyte, maybe like 256 card or 500 like me. Let's say even if you got a moderate amount, I don't know what the next size down from 256 is, but let's say even you've got like just 150 gigs taken up on your Switch 1 SD card with games, you can fit that on the internal storage, but because of the file sizes of the new games, you're going to have not much space. What you're going to fit on, maybe 2, maybe 3 new games if you're lucky. So on Nintendo's website, they have the Ask the Developer series, and they have about 4 episodes about developing for Switch 2, and they mention about their idea is that people would keep a Switch 1, and is this their way to get around this issue? They talk about introducing the virtual game cards where you can share them with friends and family. So is there a way, without explicitly saying that this is an issue, the thing I mentioned about in this video, that they've kind of thought of a way that might alleviate that issue? So they're suggesting, they see you keeping a Switch 1 still, and then you just transfer any of the Switch 1 games, so basically using your Switch 1 as storage, and then transferring the games as and when you want to play them over to your Switch 2. That's obviously not a good idea for people that were planning on selling their Switch 1 or handing it down to a family member. That's what I was planning on doing with my daughter years ago when there was rumours of a Switch Pro. I said she could have my Switch 1. But I think the games would still stand there exactly as they are because she's got a profile on it and so have I. So it would just still stay exactly the same unless there's any reason it couldn't. And she would just carry on playing them, and I can transfer games as and when I need to. Apparently, when you transfer data from the Switch 1 to the 2, or maybe even when you use the cloud backup option, apparently your Switch 1 will basically get factory reset. So if you are planning on doing that, then you're not going to have the files and stuff still on your Switch 1. So I guess, if you're wanting to sell it, trade it, etc., that's a good option because it will hopefully clear it and prevent anyone else having access to it. But you obviously want to be aware of doing that if you're thinking about giving it to, say, a family member in your house, because you'd maybe rather just, keep all the data on there and you still have access to it when you need to. So personally, if I can, I'll just set up the Switch 2, sign into my account and have that up and running. And then I'm assuming it will see and have access to my library of previously downloaded games, and then I could just download those from the eShop instead of having to transfer them from the Switch 1, which, if it's still my Switch, I don't know if there's a limit on that, but obviously if you're sharing them between friends on your family account, then you can only share 1 game at a time and up to 3 at once. So if it is still considered my Switch on the Switch 1, I'm assuming I can just have access to all the games, as many as I want at once. So what are the solutions to this problem? If it is a problem, I think it is, but maybe some of these solutions are going to be just the obvious options, even though I'd say they're not very convenient, because Switch 1, I'm sure like a lot of people, I've fit every game that I've bought, downloaded, etc. Save files, pictures, videos, everything is all, like I said, fit on 512 gigabyte SD card. There's been no need for me to archive anything or do stuff in the past. When I had a smaller SD card, I did archive a few games I wasn't playing anymore. And then once I upgraded to a bigger SD card, then I haven't needed to. Now, I'm sure we've all got games that we haven't played in ages, and so there's going to be no loss. But for, I don't know how many people out there that like this, but might have quite a few games on the go. So for example, you may want a few party games like Mario Kart and Mario Party when you have people coming round. Maybe have gaming nights, on different nights, and people will not always want to play the same game. If say Splatoon as well comes out, different multiplayer games, you're going to want to probably have access to all of them. You might have 1 to 3 single player games on the go. Let's say, you've got a rumoured Red Dead Redemption 2 on there. That's going to be huge. and you're going to be playing that for hours and hours. I won't include, say, like a Zelda game again, because maybe in this instance a lot of people go out and get the actual physical cartridge to save them having to take up their internal storage. But let's say you have that and other games that are coming out that are digital, and you're not going to just want to be sat playing that same game all the time. You want to mix it up a bit. You might have some co-op games that you'll have on the go if you're playing them with your partner, but it's not always going to be convenient to play them, or your child, and you'll just dip in and out of that. And also, if you've got games that someone else has shared with you, you're going to be interested in checking out that game, and they'll send it to you. That's going to be obviously taking up space. And then even if they still carry on doing it, the free game trials that Nintendo put out maybe once a month as part of the NSO, they're obviously, even though they're a trial, they're the full game, so you're going to have space to download that. That's not even including, say, demos where they're going to be smaller. So if all these games are going to be quite big in file size, looking at sort of 50 to 70 gigs, maybe it'll get worse, or maybe developers will put a bit more effort into compressing them. How many games are going to fit on the internal storage? How many games are going to fit even with a 500 gigabyte SD card, express card? That's fine again, like if you're just a clean, fresh Switch with another £100 spent on a 500 gig SD card. But if you're anticipating sticking your Switch 1 library on there, that's going to take up a good chunk of storage, and obviously going to have less room for all these other games. Now, if the solution is to archive them, which basically removes them from your system but leaves the icon there, then when you click on it, you have to re-download it again. How long is that going to take? Obviously, it will depend on your internet. And I've got fiber to the premises of around 72 megabytes or bits or whatever it is per second. But not everyone has. Some obviously have faster. But even then, how quick is it going to be having to go select it, download all the data again? And then let's say you play that game for a few days or a week. Like I said, if you've got party games that you're going to really want to be downloading, a game every weekend just so people can play it. People like to have pretty much their collection, I guess, on one device if they can. And I haven't got one either of the PlayStations or Xboxes recently, for the past couple of generations, I think. But maybe people are used to this with those, because you obviously have to install the games from either the discs. I'm not even sure if all the data fits on discs these days, Blu-rays these days, but maybe people are used to that. But one of the benefits of the Switch was being able to play the games without having to worry about loading times being quite so big, and without having to install the game on the day you buy it. You can just stick it in, and apart from if there's a patch, you can play it, within minutes, start playing it. If every time you're going to want to play certain games, you've got, to download a 50 gig game again, that's not obviously beneficial. So the only other solution is having more games going onto the physical game cards. Now, there's obviously an issue with the cost of those involved. It's recently been revealed that there's nothing smaller than the 64 gig, which is one of the issues of why they're not there. And developers with smaller game sizes aren't keen to spend the money on the 64 gig card. It's always been talked about how it might not be financially beneficial to be producing these smaller cards, because it would mean these companies that make them having to go out of their way to start manufacturing them, and then the difference will be negligible between, say, a 32 gig and a 64 gig card. So what's the way forward with that? As Nintendo make more and more of these cards, will they get cheaper? Will something be arranged? And also, if you've got the option of buying the game digitally or paying for the physical one, but it ends up costing £15-20 more, are people going to be happy to do that? Because enough people have been complaining about the cost of games anyway. When I went online and was buying Cyberpunk and some other games, Cyberpunk was about £65, and that was down from £70. And I was thinking, I've got a good deal on this. And then when I stopped and thought, because I thought it was only £15 more than games I used to buy, it's like, no, it's actually £25 more. Because most of the games I've bought in the past for Switch 1 or ever have very rarely been above 40 quid. I've always managed to find places selling them for around 38 to 42 pounds, even when Nintendo's RRP or whatever might have been 50. So are people going to be happy about potentially wanting to pay a lot more for a physical card so they don't have the issues with storage? It's going to be a lot more convenient than having to download 40 to 70 gigs of game every now and then. The other option is going to be just you're going to have to play a game to completion in, however many days, weeks or whatever it takes you. Get it finished and out of the way and then archive it just to free up space for, the next game coming. And like I said, if you've got multiplayer games, party games, co-op games, different games you want for, depending on your mood or whatever, things like that, then you're going to want a good few games, probably, 10 games on the go would cover that. Now, considering how many I've got on my Switch and other people have probably got a lot more, just having the thought of having just 10 games on your system is a bit unusual, but it's a way of working around it, but it's not ideal. How could this have been avoided? Would it have been, well, obviously it would have been, but how much was the cost difference if Nintendo had put in a 500 gig internal storage? Moving into the future, how much cheaper will SD Express cards be? It's going to probably take a good few years. The thing is, other SD cards have come down in price over the years, but that's because they're used in so many other devices. How many devices are going to need to have an SD Express card? Most other devices, whether they be cameras, whatever, video camera stuff, even recording in 4K, have been sufficient to have the SD cards that are around now. It's going to be very niche if there's going to be, say, 8K cameras that are going to be needing faster speeds of the SD Express card. So I don't see how that's going to help bring the prices down if it's just going to be down to Switch 2, people buying Switch 2 storage. So what do you think? Leave comments down below to say how you think, whether this is actually an issue or not, whether it's something that you think people have overlooked, how you think you're going to deal with it. Bearing in mind that after spending around £400 for a Switch 2 plus potentially, maybe £100 on games, maybe Pro Controller, etc., you're looking at maybe £600. How many people are going to be wanting to have to be spend another £100 on 500 gigs for an SD Express card too? Are you going to just keep your Switch 2 games on your Switch 2 and just transfer across a few that have got the upgrades? For example, like the Zelda games or any of the other ones that get in the free upgrade. Most of those you might play for a little bit just to check out what's different about them and then, sort of lose interest again because you've already played them. Yeah, so leave comments down below. And I should probably have a unboxing of the Switch 2, the Pro Controller, the NSO GameCube controller with a comparison with the original, which I did with the N64 NSO controller, and that was my video that got the most views. So subscribe if you don't want to miss any more content that'll be coming up in the near future. And thanks for taking the time to listen. Bye.